I'm one of the oldies.
But goodies.
From what the investigation and the questioning and the help of my brother, apparently what I understood that was in the 50s that the churches started to establish this pension fund. Okay?
This one was 1965.
Or whatever. They had, well,
See, I have been looking at this.
They chose the diocesan way to go, not the PBG. Okay, why? Because they would be under the PBG rules, and the diocesan did not want that. They wanted to be in control, okay? And that's why we're stuck, and we can't go to the PBGs. They have nothing to do with us now, from what I understand.
Well,
but what happened to the Board of Trustees and all of this? Are their pockets clean?
What?
What can you say? Really? Are there who and at where and when did all of a sudden we got no money? I was sitting in the chair crocheting after I gave my husband his medication and saw on TV we got no money. I mean, that's enough to put you into cardiac arrest.
But you know how to handle that, don't you?
Please?
You know how to handle that?
Oh, unfortunately.
I don't mean to be glib or to make light of it. You asked some very significant questions, and we're looking into it. There's no question, as all of the other speakers have said, that you people relied on your employer, you acted in the utmost good faith, and now look where you are. So I apologize if you think I was making light of it. I wasn't. And we're looking into all of these things. You're right. The church could have elected to put this plan into ERISA and gotten the guarantees. They would have had to pay premiums to do it, but more importantly, they also would have been compelled to make annual payments. So they didn't. And there's a lot of legal issues that need to be explored. A lot of legal issues.
She's going to ask another question, and then I'll ask my other ones.
Okay.
I guess I would just like clarification because you've been tossing it around. Who is St. Joseph Health Services of Rhode Island, Inc.?
That's also a very good question. St. Joseph's Health Services of Rhode Island, Inc. is the hospital management company that ran St. Joseph's Hospital before the acquisition of that hospital by Prospect in 2014. It right now stands as a shell, a hospital management company without a hospital to manage, and it is my understanding, although I do not have any oversight over this, but it has been communicated to me by their counsel that they are in efforts to wind down that shell entity. And they have been taking those efforts on since the transaction in 2014. So as of right now, it is a shell entity. It is the same entity that ran the hospital, but it is now a shell winding down its efforts, or winding down its affairs.
So it looks like we do have someone to blame. How did Kilmartin allow that to happen?
I will address that by saying we are looking at how everybody that we could identify, we're looking to see what their role was involved in that transaction. I'm looking at the history related to this. We're trying to make a determination as to what happened. And again, if there's anybody that we can hold accountable.
My next question is, how was Prospect even able to purchase all the favorable, all the good stuff, assets of the hospital, the building, the people, but not inherit the liabilities of the pension, secure the future of our pension, a very pension under their employment? How is it that if I go and buy a house and there's a lien on it or something wrong with it, I have to take responsibility of the good and the bad? But yet when they came forward to buy the property of the hospital, or however you put that, how were they able to do that? The Kilmartin allowed that to happen when he, in his own words, said that this was a good thing for the employees. But yet, they only took the good stuff. And then the other thing is the $14 million that went in. From what I understand is that was, and I don't know if I have my figures right, but there was like 53 million that went to the bondholders so that they would be paid off so that they wouldn't have to worry. But the poor nurses and people that worked for St. Joseph's were given 14 million towards their, where they got that number, nobody seems to know. And we're left without anything, whereas the bondholders, whoever they are, were given anything that they wanted. Their bond, they're left, they're gone, they don't have to worry about us anymore.
With regard to that purchase, I wasn't involved in that transaction. That is something that I am looking into. I know Max and his team is looking into that transaction. Quite simply, I don't know how that transaction came about, the negotiations or anything. With regard to the numbers, it was, I believe the entire purchase was $95 million, and it was allocated as $31 million to satisfy the bond debt, $14 million to go into the pension, and then $50 million to go into capital expenditures to improve the facilities. I don't know how that was negotiated
They
at
just
this
picked
point.
it out of the air probably, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It may be. It may have been Prospect said, this is our offer, take it or leave it. I don't know. It did go through a conversion process. It had to, under Rhode Island law, it had to go into that conversion process to convert from a not-for-profit to a for-profit hospital. And under that process, there is a review of different aspects done by the Department of Health and the Attorney General. Again, I don't know how the negotiation played out with Prospect and St. Joe's and Charter Care and Roger Williams. I just know what happened, and we're looking into how that entire transaction came about and how it was negotiated and whether or not somebody did, in fact, drop the ball during that transaction.
The other thing is that from what I've read is this whole pension fund is based on a 6.5 from the bonds and stocks. So if your investment returns, if there's no money coming in, 6.5, as you know, even in the times that we're living in right now where we have higher money coming into everybody, then how did whoever would have come up with this plan that was 6.5, you're lucky if you get from a bond like 2 or 3%, and in this year they want us to get 6.5. Well, with the pension this size and the amount of people that are in it, you're not going to have 6.5 in your stocks because they have to worry about losing those stocks if we have a downfall in the stock market. We've been lucky enough to have a big increase in the last 3 years, and yet we're now in the hole somehow. I don't understand that. I mean, like, I know when I went in the hole 3 years ago, we've come up because we've, made changes in our portfolio, but we invest and go through everything. My husband checks everything, whereas it looks like our pension was just like dangling out there someplace, and somebody said, yep, we didn't get 6.5, but, nobody's there to run it. So I'm hoping that this investigation is finding out who was running the show, as you said, and who's going to be responsible.
That's what we're looking at. I will speak generally about that rate of return. Generally, in any pension, there is a identified rate of return which changes periodically. In this case, they had it at, I believe it was actually 7 3/4. At one point, it was 6.5, 7 3/4. I don't know as to how, as I sit here today, whether or not that was a prudent number. I have my questions as to whether or not it was a prudent number once 2014 transaction closed. But you're right. It's an average over a 40, 50-year period. But as we sit here today, might have been a little too aggressive for this plan based on what was happening. And that's something that we're looking into. I don't have the answer to that as I sit here right now.
And if we had had a downfall in the stock market in the last year, where would we be then? We'd have nothing left. So obviously, whoever was investing in this was, Charlie Brown, I guess. I don't really know, because it doesn't seem like anybody that had any horse sense about, investing was doing anything for us. And I've heard over the time people talking how we're at fault, the union members, the people that I work with over the years, those that are not in the union, that we were at fault because we took too much money out. We didn't look into it, so we didn't know what was going on with our money. I'm not a financial person. I take care of my own finances, but somebody other than myself should have been taking care of this. And I hope that you find them, and I hope something's done about it.
Just to hit that last point, we are looking into everything, and I will say that I don't think there's anybody that's standing up here right now that thinks that you are at fault for the situation that you're in today. This was not your fault. You were made promises, and those promises weren't kept, and we're trying to figure it out. Okay.
5 years ago, this was a Catholic organization, and I stand here now, I'm not a really good Catholic, but I know there's a lot of people out there that have gone to church and still go to church. And they gave their time to a place that they thought was for, like within their realm of their religion. And instead of going to someplace else, the VA or the Rhode Island Hospital, they gave their time because they thought that it was going to be a moral place. Things were going to look at like that were honest. And there's no honesty in this at all. Somebody needs to go down on this, and it's just terrible. And I think the bishop is being terrible about it. And I know that's not your concern, but he doesn't care about us.
I just got to clarify.
Okay.
You're going to court October 11th, and you're going to make recommendations of what should happen to our pension plan, like the 40% deduction.
No.
That's what?
On October 11th, originally, St. Joe's Health Services, the party who put the plan into a receivership, asked the court to make that decision on the 11th. I went into court on the 8th and told the court that that was too soon, that I needed more time to evaluate. I would not have enough time to evaluate by the 11th. And the court agreed and pushed off any decision until at least January, February of 2018.
Okay.
So on the 11th, there will be no discussion with the court regarding any proposal with regard to cuts of any type or changes in benefits of any type.
Okay. So if you go to court in January with your recommendation, is it you that's doing the investigation? Okay. So you will say January, or what? Makes your recommendation, and we'll say that you make the recommendation of the 40%. But this nice guy who's doing the investigation hasn't finished his job. Okay? And and we'll say they find the church at fault that they didn't put the money in. That's a long process. So how do we get back, say he's good. All right? He's
I wouldn't bring him in if he wasn't.
really good.
Yeah.
And he gets... I might be dead by that time. But we'll say that he gets from the church, we'll say $25 million. Okay? But we already have a court order who says that we have a 40% deduction. How does that work?
That's a very, very good question. First thing I want to say is that the 40% reduction, again, that's not anything that I've adopted.
I just choose that as an example.
Understood. So what you are suggesting is something that I definitely am aware that I have to contemplate right now. And what that is whatever recommendation is made in January, February, if that happens, it is possible that I could ask the court to put that off, possible that the court may put it off. But let's assume for the moment, for your hypothetical, that we do go into court on February 1st and I make a suggestion. Whatever suggestion I make will have the input of all the attorneys that have been designated or retained. In addition, it won't be the first and final. So if Max is successful at identifying somebody who should be found responsible and believes that it's worthwhile to pursue them and get money back in, and ultimately he will be successful, when that money goes in, or at various periods of time throughout this process, if it makes sense to adjust the recommendation, then we will be doing that. Obviously, if Max is successful, as Arlene had suggested, and we're able to get all the money that needs to be in this plan so that none of you receive any cuts, then obviously whatever cut was suggested in February would be changed back to no cut. So there is a possible scenario where in January, February, there's a cut that's suggested that is temporary, interim in nature, and then we'll be reevaluating as the case progresses and as we identify whether or not there are funds to come in and things like that.
Stephen, can I comment?
Sure. Oh, he's going to turn you on. Go right
As
ahead.
far as we are concerned, though, if he's coming up with grounds, and again, the court will decide, and the receiver has, in a way, more power than we do, but we will be arguing no haircuts until we find out what's happening, because even by virtue of the motion that was filed, they say, oh, we're taking the long view, 30 or 40 years. Well, why do people have to get a haircut in 6 months then? Okay? So while we want to let you know that we will be arguing at that point that no haircut is in February or a year from October or whatever until we get to see what's what. So that's where we start to do it.
To add to that as well, I'll tell you that I could have gone forward on the 11th, as St. Joe's had suggested. I didn't think that was prudent. If I don't think it's prudent in February, I'll ask the judge again. I don't want to have to make that decision. If I decide that it has to be made, it's because I think it has to be made. But if I can put it off, then I will put it off. It all depends on how this case progresses. At this point, I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, I got one more question that I actually asked at the meeting with Arlene. I took a deduction in my retirement so that if I did die, it would go to another person within the 10 years. Is that still going to be on it? Or do we take we'll use the 40%? Would that be at what we should have collected or what we're collecting with the deduction?
That's a very good question. This is probably the first instance where I'm going to tell you I don't know the answer to that as of yet.
Okay.
I was at the meeting where Arlene spoke, and I did hear you ask that question.
Yeah, because my health is very poor. So that's a very important
That's an important
to me.
question. You're not the only one who has that question. I'm sure there are many people out here that do. It's absolutely something that is going to be looked into and considered, and I'm going to address it specifically when it comes to whatever recommendation. It's not just going to be,
Okay.
Judge, I'm looking for a 40% cut, approve it. There's going to be rationale and an explanation as to how the cut is
Okay.
requested.
Just as long as it's considered
It is.
in there. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to understand that even if we're able to determine that there are very good claims against various entities, which may result in additional funds, it's really totally unrealistic to expect that that's going to get resolved within 6 months or a year. These things can drag on for years. So somebody is going to have to address what happens to the plan in the interim. And what I think, I'm not going to be involved in any of those issues about whether certain people should be cut at the expense of others. I'm not involved in that, whatever. But I do think it's important for the whole group, if there could be some level of cooperation, for example, Arlene meeting with the union members and with the receiver, trying to come to some kind of reasoned agreement. I'm not suggesting who should compromise or if anybody should compromise, but I don't think it would be good for anybody if this ends up in a fight in court, where we're not even fighting with third parties, we're fighting among ourselves. So I'm hoping that there is an effort for everybody to get together and at least resolve that without court intervention. And I know Mr. Del Sesto is going to try to be not only the receiver, but kind of a mediator to the extent he can to get some kind of agreement so that there's not fighting in court about that.
I have another question. So right now, as it stands, who is managing the money so that we don't continue to lose funds that are in there?
Right now, the court and myself, on a day-to-day basis, me, but the court with my providing the court with updates, the judge with updates, are managing and have control over the funds of the plan, which are what are supporting your benefits. Sir?
What is the current unfunded liability of St. Joe's plan? And my second question is, what are the total assets currently of the plan? That was my first question.
Okay. I'm going to answer your second question first. That's the easier one to answer. When I was appointed, there were approximately $87 million in the plan. $87 million. There was a payment that went out in September, and there was a payment that just went out yesterday. Was it? Today's the 2nd, so yesterday. Well, I guess it would go out today. It was Sunday. The plan is paying out benefits of approximately $850,000 per month. So if you take the $87 million back out of that $850,000, call it $86 million, but there have also been investment returns that have come back in. As I sit here today, I don't know what those investment returns are, but your plan is somewhere in the vicinity of 85 to 87 million right now. In terms of the unfunded liability, it's a very difficult question to answer. It's a difficult question because the basis for how that unfunded liability is calculated is based on the number of people receiving benefits, the mortality rates that the actuary uses, which change periodically, the volatility of the market, what the plan has been doing in terms of hitting its target based on investment returns. So as I stand here today, I don't know. I think the question you're really asking is how much money do we have to put in this plan so that we're protected? And I don't know the answer to that question as I stand here right now. I've asked it. Quite frankly, I'm going to be bringing in an independent actuary, somebody who's different than the actuary that was used by St. Joe's. I'm going to be asking that question so that I get two answers on that and find out where there's a discrepancy if there is one. Yes?
My follow-up to that is, are there appendixes in the plan that could be cut other than monetary value? In which, if there's a magic number of 85, if there's some type of a spousal benefit, so you can preserve that money for as long as you can?
All of those things are being considered. When I say that there are as many options as to how to deal with this as there are people in this room, I really truly mean that. There are any number of scenarios that can be looked at. One thing I will be wrestling with is what authority do I have to change those things? So if I do come up with something that I think might work, it may be a question of do I have the authority to make the change?
Is there a copy of the trust available that so people that understand it can look at it and try to critique it and maybe help you?
I could use all the help I can get. I will tell you that it's not active as we sit here today, but it should be active tomorrow. So everybody knows I've set up the website, which has included thus far court documents, notices and court documents. I have asked, and it will be set up, I'm told, tomorrow, to set up another page which you can access from that court page, which will include documents related to the pension plan. Quite frankly, the issue, and I had this discussion with the judge this morning, is that you are entitled to information regarding this plan. The plan itself, reports that had been provided to St. Joe's during certain periods of this plan's life, so that you can see for yourself what the plan says, what those reports say, and you can make an assessment for yourself. And I'm always willing to listen to anybody's ideas as to what they see if they find something in it.
Well, I think it should have been clarified that the pension plan, the mission statement is the preservation of principle, okay? And that being said, that your interest is 6.5, okay? You can only invest in a pension plan so much in stocks. Most of it has to be in sureties. So that's why the interest rate isn't higher than it is. 6.5 isn't a lot of money on $80-something million.
No.
Trust me, I was a trustee. But the key is, what you want to do is, you want to see where that money's invested, who the money managers are, where that money goes. Is it principal? Is it Hancock? How it's being invested. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Consulting with financial advisor too, in order to look into all the trading that we're doing from, I assume the money was managed by a financial firm. And there are legal ways that people can take money out of funds, like for example, frequent trading. They make money on trading, and they can take 1% every time that they move money around, which is legal, but it's deceiving. So even if the pension was funded and we were making enough interest, by frequent trading, they will be taking money out all the time, the people who are managing.
Yes, and I've been looking into the investment manager and the practices. I've had multiple discussions with them since I've been involved. I have taken steps to identify ways that the plan investments can pay less in fees. And I will be ultimately, similar to the actuary, bringing in my own independent financial individual to come in and advise me as to whether or not they believe that the investment pool and the way that the investments were managed was prudent.
Can't hear you.
Walking over. I don't need a mic.
No, that's clear.
Mr. Paolino bought St. Joe's Hospital for $900,000. $99,000. The hospital, that hospital with the property that belonged to it, according to the tax assessor's office, was worth like $47 million. That money was paid to St. Joseph Hospital, the corporation that was supposed to be running our pension. So where did that money go, and why wasn't it encouraged to get more money to go into the corporation, into the plan?
This is the second time I'm going to say I don't have an answer to that question. Yeah, to the extent that that transaction is something that is would have an impact on this pension, we will look into that as well.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I'm a spouse. My husband literally gave his life to St. Joe's Hospital. He died. But what happens to me? When you're talking about cutting, as someone said, that they take less. Well, I'm the person that gets less.
As of right now, there's no change. If you've been receiving a pension based on spousal benefits, you'll continue receiving that. Again, I have
And
not.
what happens? Do we wait until the day the check is less?
I'm not sure I follow that.
When the pension's deposited on the first of the month, will we find out by just it's not as much as it used to be?
No. If there's a recommendation on adjusting what is being paid, how it's being paid, who it's being paid to, you will know in advance of what my recommendation is. And I think, as Mr. Wistow had indicated, when the time comes where I am going to be making or seeking making a recommendation to the court on a change, it will not be in a vacuum, and it will not be without consulting those that either are in place or will be put in place in a future date, to make sure that, as Mr. Wistow said, we can try to come to an agreed decision on how this is dealt. It's my hope that whatever happens, that it is going to be an agreed upon transaction. It'll be something where we walk into court saying we all agree that this is a prudent way to deal with it, and that there is no fight that the court has to manage. You will get notice. It won't be up, I'm opening up my mail and my check is now less than it was last month. You will know beforehand what's being recommended, and the court will enter an order which will also be circulated.
All right, thank you.
Okay? Sure. The website? Julie, do you have? It's a quite long address. What I can do is I can